The MiniMansioneerers and the Emerging Humanoids, Chapter 6. Molly Buttons had been visiting her friend, her colleague from the recycling factory, at the facilities where they both worked. She'd visited his small, compact room, as a social visit, but also to borrow the washing machine, to have a friendly chat, had been convinced to have a few drinks, and he'd loosened up, talking to her much more, and opened up about his experiences, revealing that he'd had a humanoid partner that he was experimenting with. He told her a lot about the humanoid programs that young Robo Kit had also come with. It came with a Robo package deal. He bought it from a doctor simulator. It was a simulation doctor that he'd gone to. It was an underground doctor, though it wasn't illegal in any way, he'd reassured Molly. No, it's just something that still is unknown and still potentially taboo subject. Wasn't discussed openly, not by that many, Jaden had said, casually almost. But anyway, the simulator doctor had convinced him, he said, convinced him that there were some benefits to having a humanoid partner, to practice doing some dance movements, but much more than that, with the physiotherapy programs that RoboKit had installed also, that could support him doing a wide range of different physical exercises. While his injury was still bad and recovering, and it would be a long, gradual process, the earlier doctor, the physician, had assured him. The simulator doctor had said, but with his years also of social anxiety and his problems going out and socializing, knowing how to communicate properly with others, severe problems he admitted he'd suffered for many years. This robot, the humanoid, it could potentially solve other problems for him, give him a chance to practice exercises, to simulate conversations with it, but also to simulate different human behaviors as well. He could learn to dance with the Robo Kids, doing the Robo Dance program with him. Yes, at first, it would be gradual, but he'd learn different moves if he'd never danced with others before, and never even danced, really. Then there was no fear of embarrassing oneself or making a mistake, not with a robot who would never judge you, never laugh at you, never take a funny picture of you without you knowing, and make it go viral. Never do any of those kind of things. Never gossip about how bad or weird it was. No, RoboKit, any other humanoid with those designs, could be trusted, the simulator doctor had assured Jaden. There were many positives more than that. Yes, the physiotherapy was a good start, and reason alone, simulation doctor had said, just to consider getting the package deal that RoboKit was. It came with a multi-functioning packages that could be integrated together. That meant that they were relatively complicated simulations of complicated human behaviours that could also run in sync in parallel with each other, so that it could do several complex behaviours that were in sync, aligned to each other. Those were pre-programmed, pre-installed packages that ran together sometimes, and sometimes a couple would only be needed running in sync together. Sometimes it could operate 5 or 6 different complex movements, though, of the facial muscles, of the leg movements, and the body and the arms as well. And it could coordinate, synchronizing different complex simulated movements and run those functioning together at the same time. Jaden had explained as much as he could in his own simplistic way, trying to put it in a simple language for Molly, because he felt it was complex and he couldn't really understand it, and it certainly couldn't explain it as the simulator doctor had, in a very smooth way that was also full of all the accurate technical terms. Anyway, Molly wouldn't have known what those were, and he just wanted to tell her in just what it was, just the general gist of what it was all about, really. Just to explain that it wasn't just to do a basic physio workout. It didn't just do a program of basic exercises. There was a little more to it than that. Yes, it did the dance program workout, simulating some basic human moves, some basic human dances that they could do together. And it was a little physical workout. It was good because you could focus on different areas of the body. You could work out different specific muscles. You could do specific exercises according to the different specific exercise programs that RoboKit came pre-installed with. Jaden had explained the multi-purpose functioning of the different simulation programs that could run in sync together with each other. adding that, yes, you could adapt those, modify them slightly, you could add different things to them, but they were essentially hardwired to be very specific to those specific behaviours, and that if you varied it a little too much, then it would seem stranger. It would, because it was personalised to the actual character that RoboKit was. Molly had looked at him uncertain, though, her eyebrows raised, frowning slightly, perplexed. I don't know what you mean, sir. When you say he's personalised, what? I mean, he's a robot, isn't it? Not person, surely, rationalised Molly, trying to now discern whether Jaden did have some robo-disease, robophilia, or some disorder of some sort. That maybe he saw RoboKit as a person or substitute person, was anthropomorphizing him, seeing the person as a robot, or seeing the robot as a person, as it was in the case of the humanoid. Was there a danger that he was doing that? She was uncertain. No, she didn't know him well enough, nor his experiences with the humanoid, not yet to really fully know, to discern. Besides, she wasn't an expert in any mental health and robo-psychosocial disorders, whatever they were, robo-paraphilias, and all the other different kinds. She heard of them, of course, and have known people that had even perhaps suffered from them, but not intimately. She'd not been close to those people. She'd never really studied it or heard that much enough about it, certainly not to prescribe or to talk in depth about it. So she bit her lip and kept quiet until she knew more about it, potentially. It is actually a personalised character, to be honest, began Jaden. It's created by a narrating scriptwriter and by a team of co-programming scriptwriters that support it too, or supported him, I should say. Sorry. Well, basically, narrating scriptwriter works with co-scriptwriting programmers. So there are scriptwriting programmers, and so basically, as a group, they work together creating the character. They create the character's movements. So basically, I think they used two different models, one for the voice, and then there's another one that they simulated the action, the movements of. And then they combined the two into one character, weirdly. But I love his voice as well as his movements. And they are actually weirdly in sync. You would think it was the same person, even though it's very different, said Jaden, looking over at RoboKit, almost confused himself, how this person had been fused together, created by a group of people. The narrator had recorded hundreds of answers to very simple questions to begin with, and then they went on to ask more specific questions. So he's comes pre-programmed with lots of specific subject programs, so he can do the simulated conversations. Here's about 7 or 8 specific subject programs that he has. That they are integrated as well. That's what makes it interesting. And also, the more information you feed back, he can then echo words too. So he can sort of echo what you say to him and then combine that with his own answers sometimes, or add. So it does make it more interesting, less repetitive. So I suppose, but it actually isn't just a character that's created only by a person. It's a group of people. So they will often script answers for him. But the actual narrator is always the same one. He's giving the voice to RoboKit. He will say whatever RoboKit's going to. He answers for him as him, I suppose. And so he's always got the same accent. He's always that same young man. And his tonage, his pitch, the emphasis that will shift and change. And so he does. But actually, as well, in terms of his character, he's relatively predictable in some ways. He talks quite serious on certain subjects that you can know is quite predictable. He will give certain answers, and how he will talk. He's only triggered to talk seriously at a number of things. But you can increase the different triggers that you can actually program in different reactions that he could have, so that he can then talk sort of more low-pitched or louder or in a more serious way. But other than that, his general setting is to be quite calm. He talks relatively at an average speed, like a person would. He's not too fast or too slow or too loud or too quiet. He's not too roughly spoken. He's not too rude. He doesn't use a lot of vocabulary that's offensive or slang or that's there's a large number of words he doesn't use. He can be a bit risque though sometimes, and enigmatic and a bit vague sometimes. A lot of the time, to be honest, some of the simulated conversations don't really work out that well. It's a little experimental too, to be honest. Um, so I'm sort of still playing with it. I'm still experimenting and learning with it as well, really, said Jaden. After a long speech, feeling that he was quite drunk and had gone on at length to Molly, as if feeling that he was a salesman working now for the simulator doctor or the simulator company that the doctor had hired and bought the actual humanoid from. Perhaps he believed and had some good experiences with it and just wanted to share those with Molly, the ones he felt capable of so far. Well, I liked your robo dancing together. I mean, it was entertaining. I've seen a few robo clowns, friends that have had them, and loads of videos that went viral. The robo clowns are popular. I think some adults get them for the children, but they only just do simple movements, like the juggling you did earlier. And they do, things where they'll bring flowers out of their sleeves and all sorts of weird tricks. And, they do simple kind of weird dances and funny things, funny faces, funny jokes. But they're just simple things. Oh, I've seen the simulator clowns, but they don't really seem anything like humans. They're not. No, I mean they don't do any complex movements beyond just a simple sort of joke or simple kind of act. Said Molly, shrugging, saying what her own limited experiences so far were with humanoids. She'd visited some friends long ago that had had some children, and there were humanoid jokers there that just did some basic jesting actions, nothing much really. Flowers flipped out of arm sleeves unexpectedly, water squirted out of the flower appendage attached to their waistcoats. Those sort of predictable things, really. Jokes that people didn't laugh at too many times, but large numbers of them that they could be simulated to do. Yeah, but I haven't seen them do any complex behaviour. Nothing like a dance, certainly. They did a few one-step movements, a twirl or something, but they didn't do a sequence, not a longer dance or anything, said Molly, trailing off, almost wanting to flatter RoboKids, given Jaden's love of it, not wanting to speak badly and compare it simply to a clown humanoid. That was the only experience she had, though. No, he does a lot more than just silly dancing and silly simulated talks, much more than that. He can do relatively complex simulated talks and serious simulated talks too, as well, however limited it is. Yeah, I mean, but it's only limited by how much the scriptwriters themselves, how much they all thought about it. I mean, it's relatively a well-rounded character. It's relatively simple, obviously simpler than a real person would be, of course, but it's much more complex than an ordinary character as well. Just because the person speaking, the narrator himself, is part of the script writing team, works with others, to co-produce or co-program the actual simulated actions and the simulated talk that he records. So I guess that makes it more, well-rounded, more, I don't know how to call it really. It just is more authentic, I suppose, more humane. There's more personal about it. It's more well thought out and considered, really. You can tell it's created by people, programmed by people, and voiced by a person too. Yes, it's a bit limited, and it is a bit of a caricature sometimes. He does do the same old kind of movements, the same old dances, the same old talking sometimes, But there are ways that you can add a bit of spontaneity into it as well. You do a shuffle mix. That's what I do sometimes. So it's basically where, because Molly now looks confused, unsure what a shuffle mix really was. Well, it's basically where you have these sequence of known programs. So programs that you're familiar with. You've done a workout with it and you've refined it a dozen times. I'm relatively quite familiar with it, and I've been able to tweak and twerk it, adapt it a little bit, because you can do that. You could sort of delete some of the movements. You can elongate them a little. You can add a few in. So you can adapt it a little bit. It's very hard to do it much because it's quite complex programming. Following the whole manual, for someone that's not an expert and not trained that well in it, it's very hard. You could do a few little tweaks and twerks, just a little changes, adapting it a little bit. But most of it comes with these already pre-programmed sequences of smaller programs. And so it's the order of those. Lots of sort of miniature movements that they sequence. And you often get like hundreds of those bound together in a whole long choreographed sequence. You know, like when the movies show and they just have lots of pictures flashing by and it's the order of the pictures, like that, but there's hundreds of miniature programs that are bound together, but they're then broken up. You know, like sentences are broken up then into sort of small phrases, so you can break them into smaller fragment units. And then paragraphs are broken into sentences, they're broken into phrases, they get broken up into words, and so on, you know. So it's like that. You get programs inside programs inside programs. It's a bit complicated. There's the miniature programs themselves. You never really need to alter those because they are really kind of micro movements. You get dozens and dozens of those bound together in what's a small program. They're just called the mini programs, really, said Jaden, trying to explain the more technical aspect of the actual programs. The pre-programs that RoboKit had come with and other humanoids often did too. So then there's the mini programs that are sequenced in larger orders. Even a simple movement, a small simple dance or whatever, simple exercise program or walking program or anything really. Those are often sort of dozens of miniature programs sort of put together. You can then have larger miniature programs that then put together. So you choreograph larger dances. You can cut and splice and put, you know, half of a dance miniature program with a quarter of another one, or a whole of a different one. So you could sort of fuse two different exercise dance programs together, meld them together. You know, sometimes you've got to choose the right dance programs that fit, and that sort of and merging them together. That's difficult too. Some of those program dances are designed to actually fit together, so one will lead into the other. So you can sort of cut different parts and just have whatever part you want and start anywhere in it. Really, you can start at any posture or any position you want to. Really, but you could shuffle them. That's what I was saying. I forgot about the shuffle program. Sorry, said Jaden, feeling quite drunk now, swilling around the empty glass, spilling it a little down himself even, feeling a little foolish, waffling on drunkenly about it all to her, feeling that he's not doing justice to the real great technical design that the robo-humanoid that he'd bought and was using well over the years really was. Well, you know, the shuffle mix, when you do the shuffle programming, it basically takes these smaller miniature programs that you relatively should be well familiar with, but then it spices them, cuts them into a different order. But you can adjust what the shuffle order is, so it can sequence it randomly, or it can actually do it according to sort of different moods or different subjects. Or different speeds. So and there's other kind of different shuffle alterations that you can do as well. There's loads of them. So that keeps things a bit more spontaneous, because although you might know all the different moves within all the different miniature dance programs or exercise programs, you know, whatever, you won't know necessarily the order that they'll happen in. It doesn't always properly run smoothly when you do that. It depends what kind of shuffle program you go for, really. Sometimes it just sort of abruptly goes from one exercise into another that takes some like real adjusting to. It's on a different speed, or it's a different mood, or it's just really a completely different kind of. It's just something too different, you know, and it doesn't kind of fit right. But you can just have miniature programs in the shuffle mix that do fit together, that are designed for that. But it's more fun and experimental just to try out other kinds of like exercise programs that I've tried to sort of merge in with the dance programs. Some of those fitted together more well if you adapt them a little. Then it's possible. Slow down the speed on one a little bit, and then make sure you have the joining parts of the programs somehow in synchronism. That takes a while though. You know, I've only still learning on it, and it just I really am struggling to do that part. So I just do a random shuffle mix normally if I do it. Really, that can be interesting, a bit weird, but it is fun sometimes. It keeps it interesting. Um, Sometimes, you know, I can try out new program too, something that is a strange program. I'm not something that I've never tested before. Although it has been tested by others, of course, and I always read the ratings and reviews. I would have to do a lot of research for that, you know, because complex new humanoid programs, they really cost a lot actually, and it's a huge amount to fork out really for it. So I would do that warily. I do a lot of research first if I ever do that again. One of them I bought really just didn't work out. Fortunately, I was able to return it because I didn't understand what it was actually going to be about to begin with, really. And I wasn't able to sort of fuse it in or to shuffle it in with any of the other programs that I had already known well. So I had to return that one. It just didn't work out. But normally they don't always give a refund, so it's sometimes I got to be more careful not to do that. Well, what are all these other programs then? What else could it potentially do then? Asked Molly, after some consideration. Oh, there's all sorts. There's too many to really name, just too numerous. Anything you can think of. They simulate the whole spectrum, a variety of different human behaviours, really. You can get jogging, exercise programs, so it simulates jogging, a whole variety of different dance programs. I've only got a small niche area, so it's just a fraction of the fraction of the dance programs that there are available. I would probably go for more exercise programs, a few dance programs too. Potentially. I don't know really. There's all sorts really, said Jaden, looking up now unsure. Well, the two of you could go out together, do a robo dance, some sort of performance or something, suggested Molly with a laugh, hoping to be a little encouraging. When I thought about taking them out to a dance club, well, maybe when it's empty at the beginning, when no one's really arrived there, when no one wants to go out and do the first dance, when we've got it to ourselves. I don't know. I think you need a lot of space. Just because I'd be worried. I'd be worried if someone bumps into him and knocks him. Well, you said he wasn't that fragile, though. He shouldn't wear and tear easily, should he, if he's just knocked into? And the spillage wouldn't be bad if he's sealed up. The holes, the entry points, as you said, or absolutely, yes. He shouldn't be any danger from that. No, it's unlikely there'd be any damage to the silicon natural synthetic skin is fairly robust. It would take some effort to penetrate it, to give it a sort of damage or anything. I don't think anyone would do that. It's more the attention. It's more, I don't know how people would react, what they'd think about it, if they'd even know. Did you know? When you saw us doing the robo dance, would you have guessed, do you think? Jaden had asked Molly, sitting over slouched from his chair opposite her in the small cramped room, staring over to her, wondering what her reaction would be. I don't know, she finally said, after a shrug. Well, I'd already known because you told me it was a humanoid first, so I had foreknowledge, but I don't know. It did seem like human dances for a while, but it did have the abrupt stops. It was a bit jolty, when you went from doing one type of dance sometimes to a different thing. Then it didn't sort of flow as well. It didn't always connect. Some of the actual smaller dance moves, it did seem like a person for a while, and then it sort of did, and then it didn't, if you know what I mean. It sort of yes and no, I suppose, if I'm honest. Molly had finally answered, a little drunk herself, and trying to find the words to express how she'd felt watching RoboKit doing the simulated dances, or a sequence of different smaller, simple dances, with Jaden, as they'd done the robo dances together. Yeah, it was a bit. It was a bit jolty, stop-starty. I suppose I hadn't really sequenced the smaller program dances that well, really. That's what I was saying. And I'm still learning on that. I want those sequenced much better. Much more before I'd ever go out and do it in public. Gosh. No, I don't know. It's so new here. I worry what people would think about it, really. There's just too much robophobia out there, really, because it's so new, and because there's all these videos of the bad bad experiences that people have had with humanoids sometimes. Even though there's so many good ones too, went on Jaden quickly, because Molly was about to speak, and he wants to finish what he was saying, really. So many great experiences. And when I went through the blogs, the posts, I watched other people, humanoid lovers, videos, and I read a lot of their stories. They had a lot of great positive experiences, really. People have been using robo carers, robo physiotherapy programs, just while they were ill or at home or just alone for a lot of the time. Just practicing, just actually having robo support to stand up for a long time or to do stretches that are really difficult to do on your own standing up. If you don't have anyone around, any friends that you could visit you often, if they're too busy or you've lost contact with them, they moved on, or if they could be ill themselves, or if it's just something that you could do with robotic support sometimes because you need it every day and regularly. then it's just easier. It's just then you could do a lot of the standing up, walking, leaning, stretching, crouching. The harder exercises. That puts a strain on the body, on the muscles, when you're doing it for a long period of time. And I've had to do a lot of long, difficult physio workouts. So I think he was good in the physiotherapy programs. And some of the dance programs were an addition to that, really, an extension of that, really, I suppose. So I didn't really just get it only for the dance programs. I really got it more specifically for the physiotherapy program that he was installed with. But he came with the dance programming too. So, and there were a few other programs that he could be compatible with as well. They're not easy to actually integrate, however. And Molly looked confused at all this, but didn't want to interrupt because he seemed so passionate and seemed to be enjoying explaining what his great joy of studying and experimenting was. Although she was curious to learn out more, she was certainly no robot lover herself, but she was not certainly robophobic either. Well, basically, it may not be compatible, some of the new different programs, with his personalized programs. So when it was designed, his pre-programmed installations, the personalized programs, were personalized by the narrator, the script writers, by the personalized group together. So obviously, when you have a new program, it's not going to be as personalized. It won't be as integrated into actually his own personal characteristics. It won't match or synchronize any of his character in that sense. So he won't move in the usual way, at his usual speed or in his usual sort of, whether he's smooth or rough doing it, or whether he does it in a sort of larger way or smaller, less pronounced way. There's differences in, very personal differences in not just how he simulates the movement, but also in how he simulates the talk as well. So if you buy a new simulation talking package or simulating action package, then it's not personalized. It doesn't integrate into the personalized program, but it does integrate into like other programs. It integrates into the actual behavior programs. So a behavior can still flow into another behavior, even though it won't have the same personal characteristics um, the personal humanoid has, said Jaden, trying to explain, as if he wants to give a more fuller understanding so that Molly could judge more fairly and discern more accurately more details about what the nature of the specific humanoid was that he had. Well, I suppose if it's something that you've got something out of and you feel that it's of some use to you, then I suppose it's not harming anyone, is it then? And you're able to sort of look after it and to maintain it okay? It doesn't take up too much work, too much of your time or anything? Then asked Molly, sitting back in a chair, pouring another glass of wine and sipping at it gently. Yeah, oh, it can be too much sometimes, all of it. Because it's also needing to be exercised every day. You need to heat up and work its internal mechanisms just to dry it out so you make sure that it doesn't absorb any of the moisture in the atmosphere or anything, so that nothing like fungus grows in there. It's also testing out that it is functional, that it works, preventing rusting. It's got anti-rust kind of this kind of thing that you can put inside it. It's you have to sort of put it in the hold, but that's not very often, really. Then there's the washing that has to be done. There's a specific kind of chemical formula you use to do that. Depends how often you do that, because obviously it doesn't absorb any liquids, but actually it can gather dust and other kind of dust and dirt and debris and things on its actual synthetic skin. But it's simple enough to wash that down. You just do that regularly. Yeah, it's quite simple to maintain it, really. You don't have to be a mechanic or anything like that. If there's any issues with that, you just go to Dr. Mechanic or something, really. So, yeah, it's never a problem with that. Well, I'll look out for you both in the dance hall, doing a robo dance one day. Who knows? If you get to do it and get more advanced at doing it and get comfortable going out with it, perhaps, if you ever do, suggested Molly. Oh, no, I don't think I'll ever do that. I don't know, really. I don't know that we'll ever get that far. Well, we have gone out to the local shop. That's about as far as we've got together, really. We're not any further than that, really. I only really dance in the room, really, because sometimes, well, as you said, it's a bit jolty. It's a bit yeah, it doesn't really work that well, to be honest. It's a bit stop and starty, like you said. Isn't the point of a dancing machine just to entertain people, though? I mean, how entertaining is it if you're doing it on your own? Or is it sort of a rehearsal, a practice? Just sort of trying to learn to do more dancing and to loosen up? Well, it's a bit of both, yeah. It is kind of learning it as a rehearsal, as you say, but it's also me sort of trying out different things, moving different parts of the body. It's also a physio workout as well, really. It's to support me and teach dance movements, really, so I can learn to do longer, slower, or different combinations of movements. Just choreographing the body to do lots of different stretches and movements is a lot more of a challenge than I thought, really. I don't know that's really for show or entertainment. Could be, but I don't know. Depends how well the exercises go, really. But it's more of a physiotherapy support, and it is a little fun, but sometimes it's not really. A lot of it isn't, actually. Well, how else does he support you in going out to the shop? I mean, is he able to do much in the shop visits when you go out on those occasions? Asked Molly, going on probing and questioning. Well, he carries like heavy trays. He can carry like bags and like all sorts. Yes, he's got a very heavy weight that he's able to carry. So that's something. I can lean on him also if I get sort of pain and if I'm hurting more on one side of the body, where the injury was bad, on that side of the leg and the midsection and the arm even before it healed more. So I was able to sort of lean on him as a crutch almost. And he put an arm around me, the robo arm, so he could do that sometimes. It also sort of, simulates conversation while you're going along. I don't like to do that to distract us from going along, and also, I want him to sort of focus on the motion sensor, and also adapting his own sort of programs accordingly. So that's enough, really. If you run too many program functions simultaneously, especially newer ones, if we're visiting a new shop or a new corridor or something, or when a new person is passing him, then it will slow down in the program functioning. If it's doing multi-functioning programs at the same time in sync, then those could slow down, or even sometimes they stop if something really dramatic will happen. I mean, it's good he can do an alert stop or alert move. He does like a quick move, but like I said, he's about average as a person would react. So if a heavy object or a person relatively far away, he has time to move if they should get close to him or something to avoid a collision. He has average reaction speeds, and abilities, really, but not in places that he doesn't know that well, because he's got to absorb all of the new visual information. He scans new areas, and he scan the movements of different objects as well. So then the program will become more familiar with those type of routine movements that typically will then happen. So he's then able to more easily adjust the regular functioning programs that will be running together. He can then adapt those. If it's someone then moving towards him in a way similar to how others have them, then he'll react in a similar fashion that he did before, if it was acceptable. If it wasn't, then you can then program what was, or you can try to sort of. There's various risks to it. I'm not saying it's foolproof, and I'm not saying that it's. I don't know exactly what these are. I guess that's why I've been quite cautious, just about taking it out into unknown places, just because of I don't know the risks of it in some places that much. So I want to do more research. But he's all right just going to the local shop. He can do a sort of a march up. He does a simulated march, carrying, stretching. I lean on him for support, rest on him sometimes. So it's good for that in that sense. Well, since you're going out more, then I suppose you'll be able to take him out more to the places that you're able to then, said Molly, summing up. Yes, I suppose it's useful in that sense. There's only limited ways, really, just for carrying things, really. But it's also that experiment, as I said. I see him as a kind of challenge, really, and something funny to do as well. As long as there's no accidents, and there shouldn't be, really. Um, I don't think people are that humanoid phobic around here just because they're not that familiar with it, really. But if they should discover he was a humanoid, that would be different, potentially. Not everyone would be accepting as you, Molly. And because it's just so weird and so new to them, I guess people don't know what to think. Jaden had said, thinking that Molly was already on his side because she'd not pronounced any judgment or anything yet, certainly no scorn, but she was still on the fence and a little undecided, shrugging at this, giving a neutral face back. Neither a smile nor a frown, though. Well, I don't know. I don't know what to think. I don't know what most people would think, really, she finally admitted. It looks exactly like a person. It sounds like a person, too. Well, when he did the simulated talk earlier. Well, until, for a while it did, just for a few questions. Before it went further, then it became, yes, it did become a bit weird, some of it. But earlier on, it did sound, and it did look, some of the dancers, just like a person, for a while, admitted Molly. Well, it is just an experiment. It's a challenge. I don't think I'm doing any public robo dancing. Nothing like that. Nothing like you saw. That's just because I'm not a professional dancer anyway. There are people, well, not here, but there are people elsewhere that are professional humanoid dancers. They've been doing and following humanoid dance programs for years and years. I'm just new to it. So, I'm not an expert dancer and certainly not an expert with humanoids either. So, no, it's just for fun. It's just for my own sort of interest at home, really. Well, if that's how you get your fun, said Molly after a long pause, thinking about it, accepting now another glass of the wine, having poured the last one down. Who am I to judge it? I don't know enough about it, really. Yes, it's a bit strange, I admit. I don't think it's really hurting anyone, seriously, though. I mean, as long as you don't do it too much or depend on it too much, I suppose. It seems like it's not hurting anyone, said Molly, feeling though that she hadn't perhaps thought about it seriously or deeply enough yet, nor discussed it with others. She certainly hadn't researched other humanoids because they didn't exist in her home, in her world. She knew of no one that used or lived with or had personal relationships or exercised personal programs with any humanoids. Well, I was never really into robots. I never had a robot obsession or robophilia, nothing like that for years. I had a passing interest in computing, in different robot designs, in mechanics as well, a little, but not a great interest. I wasn't a professional, I wasn't an expert. I certainly wasn't obsessed with robots or mechanisms. I knew nothing of humanoids for years either, really. Um, then at the markets, I bumped into a humanoid salesman. Well, he gave out some pamphlets, gave his whole spiel, a huge talk about it, told me about some of the positive benefits, that sort of thing. Watched a few simulated videos about it, some of the simulated dancers, that sort of thing. But it was mostly the simulated physiotherapy workouts that I was attracted to because I thought that they would be really good. Actually, I got taken there in the wheelchair by a friend, and he left me there just for a while while he did some shopping around the market. Well, I could wheel myself around. It wasn't too much effort because my hand and arm on that side were okay by then. So anyway, I wheeled myself around from the art store where he left me, and then, well, I went up to this weird store where they had these humanoid models. They looked from a distance like people. When I got up close, yeah, I could tell they were just kind of mimicking people, really. Well, they were mechanical statues. Those were just simple ones. He said, the salesman said he wouldn't have the more complicated ones, the advanced, the expensive ones. He wouldn't have those on show in a public place. But he just had some mechanical statues. They just sort of did simulated marching, a few simulated gestures, dancing, simple dances really. A twirl, a little can dance, kicking out the legs around. They were a little funny. There was a crowd stood around watching it. Well, it was passing crowds that trickled through really. A steady flow of people passing by. I wheeled over really in the wheelchair just to see what other people were up to, just to see what the interest was in it really. Well, after a few of the sort of mechanical mannequins performances, some of the crowds went away. Well, when they were having a break in that, I was looking at the store, watching some of the videos, the simulated dance humanoids. Wow, I was amazed by it. People really were dancing with these humanoids, and they were doing more complicated dances, better than me, better than some people I knew. Well, I never really danced. But anyway, I was intrigued by the videos. Sales guy talked to me, and he was telling me about, well, when he noticed the injury, I told him what had happened, the fall. I told him how it had gotten worse, how I'd already had the RSI years ago, and the RSI had gotten worse and worse after the injury too. And I told him just how I needed physio at the time, really. And I was just struggling, like getting different things to lean on to support myself. I had friends visit irregularly, who just occasionally to do it. That's what he was trying to sell me, the whole physio therapy one. It was a physio humanoid. That's it. The physio humanoid. The model we didn't have there at the time, though. So he just showed me some videos, stuffed some pamphlets in my pocket about it. I didn't think of much of it, really. I didn't tell my friend at the market about it either. I wheeled on and looked up some of the other pottery stalls. They had ceramics and the different jugs. I bought a couple of vases, actually, just some ornaments as a gift for my friend, just to thank him for taking me out in the wheelchair around the markets, because I could never get out to them anymore. That's what I was telling the guy at the market stall. I really appreciated having a robot wheeler just to take me out, really. But I couldn't wheel it myself that well because it wasn't electronic. It wasn't something I could sort of just control through the press of a button or something. So it meant I was having to push it myself. And on my weaker hand, it got really harder. So I only got round a dozen or so stalls. Um, After I went round the ornamental stalls, I was sort of getting bored at a bookstall. After about half an hour of that, I was sort of wheeled over and then was reading through all the humanoid leaflets, because I didn't really look at them, really. Not when I was talking to the guy at the market stall himself, looking at more of the simpler humanoid models, just the mechanical statues that they were, really. Some of them just did bending up and down, twisting round, or they did a turn on one foot, kind of just showing off a variety of just simple moves. I didn't get a chance to really read and look at the pictures or read the grey blurb, whatever it was. So I was kind of studying that because it was like a miniature book, really, like a whole thick pamphlet. And yeah, I was getting really into it. I just really thought there's a potential there for it, because they actually do physio programs that are whole, excessive workouts, and you can structure some of those around actually your needs, because there's a whole variety. There's thousands of those different humanoid physiotherapy programs, so you can choose a combination of different specific ones. Um, Many of Kit's actual programs, the physiotherapy ones, don't fit his personalized program. So because they're very specific to the workout needs that I had, really. However, I chose actually the humanoid model kit. I chose RoboKit because he already came with a few physiotherapy programs, as well as the dance programs too. So some of them were more physio dance programs, and others were more just kind of exercise physio programs. He came with a combination of those. Some of those could be integrated together, and then you could adapt and have other ones, less personalized programs that could be added to it. So that's why I got RoboKit, because he was a reasonable model for the abilities that he had. Although they were simple sequences of physio and dance movements, they were just enough to to support me in doing it. They could hold me up if I was stood up for a long time. You know, they could support the whole of the body if I was leaning forwards or leaning over or just leaning to one side, or if I was stood up or so he's there to support me, to lean on, and also so that I can sort of lean on him whilst I'm also moving. So I'm not just stood like a statue doing the exercise, the physiotherapy. So it's a moving physio workout. So he can support me during the different positions, the different postures that I'll need to stretch the muscles in. Jaden had explained it all, of how he got RoboKit, his own humanoid, going on, though, to explain that RoboKit was actually a copy of thousands of other similar RoboKits that existed out there, even though he was the only first one that had actually been hired out, or that had a person that owned him or that lived with him, the only one in their world or in their known world. Yes, there were other RoboKits that existed elsewhere, thousands of copies of them, in fact. That made it more desirable, so that if there was something faulty with one part of it, there were always multiple other similar parts that could replace it as well. And also you could read all the different reviews, all the different ratings. You could do lots of research about other people's experiences with RoboKit too. Thousands of other people had danced or had different physio workouts, had all different experiences with RoboKit too. They were obviously their own personal, subjective experiences, of course, and only a few of those had been willing to talk openly within the private blogs about the actual experiences with RoboKit. Some of the other more popular humanoid models had sold tens of thousands and were mass-produced, great long production lines that were sold in the Megatronian worlds, where humanoid models had advanced to becoming so popular and ubiquitous they'd flooded the market because they'd been released so many years ago, over a decade ago in fact, when some of the more simpler humanoid models that simulated more simple human conversations and actions, they'd been released onto the market and become growingly popular, exploring and going into more different areas of life, where they were even prescribed as humanoid companions to those people that were lonely, detached, struggled to communicate or to have social relations with others, due to their own abilities or due to their own circumstances sometimes too. For a whole variety of reasons, people engaged with exercises with humanoid partners, for a whole variety of potentially good and bad reasons. And there was a whole world of different experiences, though not always reported, Jaden had said. So he looked about all the different reviews and all the different blogs and posts of the humanoid lovers, as they called themselves, those that had used RoboKit particularly themselves. There were thousands of other popular models out there, some that had been copied, reproduced, and had sold tens of thousands of imitations of their humanoid design, that were really having a mass appeal, that were really popular with lots of people because they had a very specific personalised design that was especially popular to some demographic groups. Yes, there were a few hundred of these that were rated in a whole series of charts, in fact. Those were often bought by tens of thousands of different people. Some of the larger models that were really popular had actually sold hundreds of thousands, but over in the Megatronian world, where they've been selling those to millions of people. And over 10 years, those had amassed. Some of those RoboKits had been retired long ago. Many had had many owners and been sold on, or had multiple owners sometimes too. Had had a whole series of different people that had used the RoboKits or the other humanoids themselves. Yes, there were a larger number of the different humanoid models in the catalogues. There were hundreds of different ones to choose from. A large amount of those were just simple humanoids, just that simulated more simple behaviours really, and had a very limited number of synchronized complex programs running integrated within the actual wider system themselves. There were lots of charts that Jaden had showed Molly of all the different simulated humanoid models, the different types that really specialised in simulating different types of human behaviours. A whole variety of them. I can see why you'd want to do it potentially for the physio, if it's really a support to lean on and it's helping you stretch to do more different kinds of exercises. Yes, I can see there's a potential function, a benefit to it, admitted Molly, seeing that there were a whole variety of the different humanoid models, but just looking at a small fraction of those within one of the simulator catalogues that Jaden had. He'd had it from months earlier, before he'd chosen RoboKit himself. Well, there's all sorts here, isn't there? My gosh, there's some really attractive looking ones. Although that doesn't show how they move, I suppose. It just shows the different postures that they do with a description of it. Oh no, you really need to look at the videos much, much more. You need to see the humanoids videos to really know, the simulation movements, if you're interested, said Jaden. Oh, no, not really, protested Molly. No, I was just intrigued, really. I just saying the pictures in the actual catalogue, that's not really enough to sort of know what the humanoids' movements would be, surely. Although it's just a brief description of it, I suppose. No, exactly. Yeah, you've got to watch them and listen to them before you actually know what they really can do, and to know if you can be adaptable to them as well. Well, I suppose he's very handsome. I mean, your RoboKit. I can see why he's popular. And I suppose he does very nice movements as well. But yes, he is very attractive, admitted Molly, annoyed now that she'd referred to him as a man and not it as an actual robot, slipping into what Jaden had done, referring to the gender masculine title for the robot rather than the gender neutral. She'd not wanted to do that, to encourage his anthropomorphizing of the robot. She'd noticed Jaden had perpetually done it throughout his talk, though, throughout the sales pitch even. Whether that was unconsciously or on purpose, well, she wasn't sure yet, or whether that was just what he was more familiar with, that he treated it like a man, although he knew it wasn't, she hoped. Or was it just to distinguish it from other female humanoids? Because, of course, it did have a very masculinized design. Yes, it did appear as a younger male, a younger humanoid male, rather than and opposed to a female humanoid. Well, yes, it clearly is a male, she said. I thought so. Well, I chose him for that reason. I had to make a few adaptations, really. Yeah, because he's really handsome, admitted Jaden. You know, he's nice to look at as well. And his voice has a very nice sound to it. One that you can understand. It's pronounced relatively well. So I kind of get on with it. Not everyone does. It's got mixed reviews, to be honest, very mixed ratings. But it's legible. You can understand, and it's relatively coherent. Not all the time, perhaps. It's a little too casual, but not too serious. Um, but yeah, to look at, he is attractive, I suppose. But beauty's in the eye of the beholder. You know, what's attractive to one isn't others. But yeah, there are lots of the humanoid models that are selling thousands. There are hundreds of them that are selling hundreds of thousands, of course. But there are thousands that are just selling many thousands more, or hundreds only sometimes. Sometimes they only are personalized and they only sell, dozens. It varies greatly. You can even get very personalized ones that are designed only and specifically just for people, of course. So a lot of Megatronians, those people that live and work and that have experienced humanoids, they often have personalized individual humanoids for themselves sometimes. There are thousands, I think tens of thousands that have done that. So there are tens of thousands of ultra personal humanoids. But the majority of the humanoids really, they're copies and they are replicas of each other, really. Sometimes there are just dozens of them, sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands. Like RoboKit, I think there's something like 18,000 or something like that. But actually, so he's not really one of the most popular. I think he makes the top 200 or 300 humanoids. That's others that have sold hundreds of thousands. I think there's some that are really just, well, it's hard to know how many have been sold, because there are also other copies of them that there may not be registers of. So nobody really knows the exact amount, really. Those are just the estimated sales figures that they have. But who knows? Said Jaden, now taking the catalogue of the different humanoids away, putting it on the stack of other technical manuals for the operating the different humanoids and his specific manuals for operating RoboKit, putting them in the stack, the pile of books wedged in on the large tables. Well, it clearly takes a lot of work and effort just to operate and program it much, I suppose. Still, it's a lot of work. I mean, there's a whole variety of those different characters there. It seems like there's something for everyone to choose. And why wouldn't you just choose a personalised one, though? Why would you want one that everyone or lots of other people want, though? Asked Molly, unsure. Well, I guess because it could just do some simple dances that lots of people need, or it just tailors programs that are just general exercise workouts that are relatively simple, that have a mass appeal, or that a lot of people would benefit from. Very similar dances that lots of people would do, similar workouts that would suit a lot of injuries that large numbers of people might have. Those sort of reasons, really, and also because as well, a really ultra personal humanoid that would cost so much more as well to do. Yeah, even though the technology is maybe a decade or so old, still it's relatively still quite new. Maybe it will get cheaper in time to have an ultra personal humanoid, but it's right now you just get one that's sort of a copy. It is a personalized humanoid, but it's not your own personalized humanoid. So it's basically there are a whole variety of personalized humanoids that are created by different groups of people, script writers, narrators, mechanics, of course, artists, there's a whole group of people. Sometimes it takes hundreds in the early time, and then you sometimes get half a dozen people. So the narrating scriptwriters that will create the simulated talk programs as well. Um, so yeah, there are sort of auto personas that are popular in society in the Megatronian world. There are hundreds of those that are really well known. Actually, they're almost like social characters that everyone knows because there are so many thousands of those auto characters out there. Everyone's met them. Everyone's familiar with them. So in a weird way, they are like social popular characters, but they're still caricatures. They are a little deep, but not that deep, really. So they're never as complex as a real person is. Of course not, because it's only ever a simulation. But it really is a simulation of a series of really complex behaviors. Like I said earlier, all the miniature programs within it are then sequenced together so that it's actually multifunctioning and synchronizing all its multifunctioning complex programs all at the same time. For a complex personalized humanoid to actually do that, there's really only a limited few that are really able to do it to an advanced level. So most of the humanoids, even the ones that the Megatronians are familiar with, that they'll see out regularly, hundreds of thousands that are out there. I think people estimate there's a few million, and the Megatronian world is what, a billion or two, something like that. So they've got a few million humanoids out there, but there's really only tens of thousands that are so advanced enough to appear as human-like for a limited time. After a few minutes with them, even with the advanced humanoids, most people will then realize it will then become apparent. It's quite easy to fool people just for a few seconds, sometimes even for a few minutes. And they do loads of videos where people are fooled for hours, days, even a few weeks, incredibly, by some of the more advanced, complex humanoids. But that's rarer that anyone gets fooled for that long. It really doesn't happen that much. Because even with the sequenced, complex, personal human programs, really, those are it becomes obvious. It just is apparent after a while, um, because it's just so limited still. So it's really only for a few minutes that it can keep up this human simulation, even a more complex, advanced, like a personalized humanoid. It would fool family members into thinking it was the person, but not for that long. It couldn't keep up the performance. It couldn't simulate a good, accurate performance of the person for an extended length of time. It could do it for a few seconds, a few minutes sometimes. It's done it for a few hours with some people, and people try to push it and see how far they can go with it. But with people that are close and family and that really know the person, they can know it's not the actual person, but it's the humanoid. Most people can work that out quite soon. And even strangers will know after a time, even after a short time, a few hours. It's pretty obvious. It becomes quite clear that it's a human simulation. Um, that's usually obvious. There are situations when it's not so much. If people are drinking a lot or somebody is not capable or able to distinguish of that, or they have severe emotional mental problems at the time, or they're severely impaired in their abilities, there are occasions when it's not possible to. If your judgment to discern is severely affected somehow, then yes, on those occasions, it can affect people's ability to distinguish between the advanced personal humanoids and a real person. Most of the time, it's really obvious. The vast majority, no one will get confused between a personalized humanoid, and a person. That's what we call them. And that's what the Megatronians call them. Those people that are familiar, that use the humanoids, the humanoid lovers, they call them. So, yeah, Jaden had given his long, rambled speech to Molly, trying to tell her a little bit about the robotic history of the Megatronian people that had fully embraced the humanoids, that had already a humanoid history and a humanoid culture, however young and immature it still was, but it was still advancing, yearning, and discovering new abilities, but new risks and fears that were advancing too, as well as new desires, and new joys, and new understandings, and new education and development of the robotics too. A whole bewildering array of different social robotic problems and different social robotic solutions had allegedly all been discovered in the Megatronian world. Still, those were conflicting and debated reports that had emerged from the world. where they often had used the humanoid experiments, and people had often humanoid relations, whether those were good, bad, or mixed. It varied greatly, confessed Jaden, saying that he wasn't part of the Robophilia Alliance, or he wasn't trying to advocate for their use for others, just that he himself had felt some benefit himself. Though he did admit that there were perhaps some risks of over-depending on the robotic programs sometimes.